I'm Uncle Des Dyer, a Derrick elder. I'd like to acknowledge my ancestors, the traditional owners of the land, and any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander in the room today. A welcome to country was a part of our dream time. It became a part of our dreaming and become law. And what it is you would wait at my boundaries before you can come on to our land. And you'd send either a message stick, sign with a message stick, or you'd light a fire and we'd see it. The land of the Darrick Nation, it starts from Little Hartley up in the mountains, runs along the Bells Line Road to Richmond, along the Colo River to Brooklyn, from Brooklyn along the Hawkesbury, all the way down to Hornsby, into the Sydney Basin. From the Sydney Basin to the mouth of the Georges River, and it runs all the way out to Liverpool, Campbelltown, Aspen, Camden, and back up along the Nepean River all the way up to the mountains. There is 36 clans, 132 dialects. So tonight, or today, whatever, I'm welcoming you all to the Darrick Nation. So welcome everyone.
Launching this evaluation report of our Starts in Schools program. This is how we've been learning since the beginning of Starts during these 30 years. Evaluating, thinking about what we do, learning from it. And the area of working with children and youth is probably one of the areas where we've learned the most. When we began 30 years ago, we thought that torture and trauma affected mostly the adults that bear the brunt of that. Soon, however, we realized that children were being affected by the experiences of their parents, and increasingly, unfortunately, by their own experiences of torture, of trauma, of dispossession, of difficult transit experience in the context of becoming refugees. What we've learned is that these experiences affected the way they learned, their behavior at schools, how we were able to deal with this very difficult transition into a different country at an age when we all experience different problems. This also affected family life, and more importantly, it affects or can affect their future. So over these 30 years, we've been developing different tools to assist refugee children and young people in their intersection with schools. This come together as the Starts in Schools program, which combines counselors who specialize in working with young people of school age, a youth program, again, youth workers specialize in working in a trauma-informed and refugee experience-informed way. And in the last few years, the Stars School Liaison Program, which added another a much-needed layer to this trio of programs working together under the banner of a Starts in Schools program. Together, we're able to work hand in hand with teachers, with counselors, with parents and the school community to ensure that refugees get as good a start as possible in their intersection with the school at this difficult time. And what a difficult time these last few years have been. The program started soon after the additional intake of people from Syria and Iraq. And it was set up to assist, what was deemed to be a very young cohort. It worked really well with them. And it's been so handy to have these three programs working together at a time when New South Wales have been impacted by COVID, by the lockdown, by the challenges of young people learning and going to school, mostly in a digital way. COVID-19 has impacted the most vulnerable populations, and of course refugees as one of them the most. And on top of that, of course, we've continued to have different refugee crises. Myanmar, and most recently, Afghanistan. This crisis places enormous pressure on young children. on young people. They make their schooling more difficult. They introduce a whole new gamut of stresses that play havoc in their lives. They also stress their families and therefore make the support systems less able to support them at this difficult time. And this is when schools and organizations like STARS have been set up to work with the impact of trauma need to come together. The Starts in Schools program brings all these elements together and provides us with the capacity to do exactly that. It's an investment that is essential to ensure that refugee children and young people have the best start to life in Australia and can fulfill their potential. And by fulfilling their potential, of course, contribute to a better New South Wales, to a better Australia. I think the program has a bright future. The report confirms how well it's working in supporting refugee young children start a new life in Australia. And it's essential that it continues and that it continues to grow in line with the refugee program. It is an investment that is worth making, and I hope our government will continue to make.
Hi everybody, my name is Sarah Mitchell and I'm the Minister for Education and Early Childhood Learning in New South Wales. I'm in Sydney today, so I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from Gadigal land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm really thrilled to have been asked to be a part of the launch of the Starts in Schools Evaluation Report 2021. Thank you so much for including me. The Starts program is a really important initiative that assists our refugee students at school. This has been particularly important in recent months with the unrest in Afghanistan and the Starts team's rapid response to the crisis, supporting Afghan students in New South Wales. While COVID-19 has been a challenge for all of us, Starts has supported students with links to Afghanistan and their families throughout the entire pandemic. We know that the current crisis in Afghanistan has had a substantial impact on Afghan families in Australia, and since August, there's been a steep increase in people seeking help through the organisation following the fall of Kabul and the emergency humanitarian evacuation. Many students and their parents or carers with ties to Afghanistan are experiencing acute anguish, grief and re-traumatisation at this time. They likely have relatives who they are worried about. The work that is being done by Starts to provide counselling and therapy to those who need it is just so important, and it means that students can get the support that they need to continue their schooling. In this distressing time, the Starts team has provided students with routine and comfort, identifying areas where they are struggling so that they can work with them and with their families and provide that crucial support. Being there for students and preparing them for changes where possible so that they can focus on completing online lessons and schoolwork has been incredibly valuable. Helping to remove additional stress from a student's life and assist them to find alternate times to sit exams or get an extension on an assignment's due date has provided them with the flexibility that they need during a time where they might struggle to concentrate or focus. It is so important that our students have the time that they need to process what is happening and prepare for the tumultuous situation that is unfolding, and that they're supported by their school throughout. Starts reminds students that education can be a place for students where they can find routine, purpose, interest and positivity. So thank you so much to the entire team for being there for our refugee students as they go through an incredibly difficult experience. We are all so grateful to you for your work.
Hi, I'm Peter Shergold, and since 2015 I've been the Coordinator General of Refugee Resettlement in New South Wales, actually now the Coordinator General of Settlement. And during those years I've really come to admire Starts and the way it partners with government agencies. I've learned so much from talking to Jorge and Yasmina And that's why I'm delighted today to participate in the launch of the Starts in School evaluation report. Now, I've got to say, evaluation reports, well, they can be dull. This report is not. It's thoughtful, it's thought-provoking, but at its heart, it's inspiring. It shows what can be done through early intervention. Now, we all know that when young migrants arrive in Australia, especially if they're not fluent in English, things can be tough. They've got to learn English. They've got to learn how the classroom and the playground and the sporting fields work. Often, of course, within a few years, they're taking on the responsibility of helping their parents integrate into Australian society. But the challenges for refugee students from a non-English speaking background can be so much tougher. We know they're tough, we know they're resilient, but often, of course, they do carry with them the burden of that refugee experience. They do suffer traumas, and that's where the intervention of Starts, working with school principals and teachers and the Department of Education, can make such a difference. And this evaluation report shows has made such a difference. And of course, it's great that through Starts Care, student-centred care, the difference can be made. It's great for governments because that early intervention means that these young people are less likely to become welfare dependent in the future. But the real benefit, of course, is for these young people themselves. Because with the support of Starts, they are in a so much better position to find employment, to build careers, to start businesses, to become active citizens. That at its heart is what this evaluation report shows. Well done. I am so pleased to participate in the launch.
Good day, everyone. My name is Dr. Ansuya Naguran, and I'm the Community Development Evaluation Officer at Starts and the co-author of the Starts in Schools Evaluation Report. It is my pleasure to present to you the findings of this report today. While I am joining you from my home country of South Africa today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this report is being launched, the Cabral people of the Darug Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. I would also like to acknowledge the co-author of this report, Damaris Quintero, for her dedicated work on this report, as well as many other colleagues, too numerous to name, who contributed to the completion of this report being launched today. The Starts in Schools program is delivered through internal collaboration between Starts School Liaison Program, Youth Team, and Child and Adolescent Counsellors, as well as through external collaboration with the New South Wales Department of Education and Catholic Education Office. The findings of the Starts in Schools report show the significant impact that Starts in Schools has had over 4 years on improving the access of children and young people of refugee background to specialist services, on improving the well-being of children and young people from refugee background, and on enhancing the capacity of those working in schools to provide appropriate support to learners with refugee experience. An important objective of Starts in Schools was to provide seamless access for children and young people of refugee background to START services. Records from START's central database show that between 2017 and 2019, a total of 4,816 school-aged children and young people of refugee background were referred to STARTs. 98% of those referrals were accepted. In the first year of the Starts in Schools program, referrals of children and young people to Starts more than doubled, with referrals increasing year on year since. Between 2017 and 2019, a total of 14,792 counselling sessions and 2,958 trauma-informed group work sessions were delivered. The growth of delivery of group work sessions more than doubled in 2017. Another important component of the Starts in School strategy is professional development delivered to school staff aiming to enhance the capacity of schools to support children and young people of refugee background. In total, 191 training sessions were delivered between 2017 and 2019. Evaluation survey data collected from 48 training sessions indicates a significant increase in knowledge and confidence of school staff in their ability to work with children and young people of refugee background after completing training sessions. School staff also self-reported a high level of satisfaction with training. The findings of this report show that accessing START services significantly improved the well-being of school-aged children and young people of refugee background. The analysis of the World Health Organization's 5 Wellbeing Index, or WHO-5, from 123 students indicated an average increase of 12% in scores of well-being, suggesting that students experienced improvements in their mood, stress levels, and sleep as a result of their participation in START's programs. In addition to the WHO-5 Wellbeing Index, attribution of change interviews relating to aspects of student well-being were conducted with 93 students and 15 teachers. Interview responses show that 97% of students felt happier as a result of participating in START's programs. Reasons included an increase in friendship and sense of belonging, an increase in sense of being accepted by others, improved physical and mental health, improved confidence, feeling calmer, having learnt new skills, and having been exposed to new positive experiences. Interview responses show that 77% of participants reported making new friends as a result of participating in START's programs, contributing to an increased sense of belonging, which is vital to successful resettlement. 50% of students interviewed reported sleeping better since participating in START's programs, and attributed this change to feeling more relaxed or less stressed. Responses from interviews with teachers also reflected significant improvements to student well-being. 87% of teacher responses indicated improvements in academic performance as a result of attending START's programs. 86% of teachers interviewed indicated observing an improvement in the concentration of students since participating in START's programs. This can be attributed to participants feeling calmer and better able to self-regulate. 53% of teacher responses indicated an increase in attendance, which teachers attributed to participants' engagement in START's programs. Teachers reported that attendance at school was stronger on the days that START's programs ran at their schools. 80% of teacher responses indicated a significant positive change in respect that participants showed towards themselves and others, particularly across cultural backgrounds, across genders, and between students and teachers. 7 clusters of government and non-government schools were supported or established by STARTs between 2017 and 2019 statewide, with the purpose of bringing schools together to work collaboratively and grow their capacity to effectively support students from refugee background and their families in their schools. Findings show that systemic changes resulting from participation in these clusters included greater collaboration between schools to address common needs and challenges, a greater systemic awareness and understanding of the refugee experience and needs of children and young people of refugee background, improvements in the enrollment and school transition processes, and progressive implementation of the refugee readiness audit in schools. The importance of the clusters as spaces to advocate for the needs of schools and their students, particularly in rural areas, was also highlighted in the evaluation results. The recommendations based on the findings of this report include that STARTs in schools should continue to provide support to children and young people of refugee background, as well as continue to enhance the capacity of those working in schools to provide appropriate support to learners with refugee experience. I invite you to access the full report and recommendations on START's website, www.starts.org.au.
Once again, thanks very much for the contributors, for the presenters in this wonderful DVD clip, but also people who made this from a technical point of view. So indeed, it really summarized the impact of traumatic experiences on children and young people, and then the importance of early intervention, but also highlights the finding of this school starts in school program, but finding of this report, but a recommendation. So great work. Indeed, like we had, once again, we had high witness our wonderful work with schools during this crisis in Afghanistan, supporting families and students who were highly distressed in dealing with a lot of grief and impact of what had happened in Afghanistan with their wonderful work. So now I would like to introduce somebody who doesn't need much introduction, actually, Dr. Greg Go, who leads the in our sister organization, Foundation House. He leads the like the education in early years program. Foundation House is also a statewide organization, and Craig was our former colleague. So actually, he managed to get out of STARS and go to Victoria Foundation. We had good memories when he worked with us. Basically, Foundation House Education in Early Year Program, a Victoria State-wide service, supports schools in early years service providers to respond to children and families from refugee backgrounds. Craig has a long-standing interest in young people, education, and refugee resettlement. His PhD explores the experience of refugees from Horn of Africa, a region who are resettled in suburbs of Melbourne. During 2020, Craig and his team launched Foundation House Innovative Schools for Refugees website. We're so lucky to have you, Craig, and thank you for Craig is going to mediate the panel discussion. So it's all in your hands, Craig. Thank you.
Thank you, Nuria. It's lovely to be with you today. And thanks so much for the invitation. And indeed, yeah, brother, sister organizations.
Yeah, pleasure.
So it's terrific to be with you and to participate in the launch of the Starts in Schools evaluation report. Now we're going to have a panel discussion in order to unpack Starts in Schools and to look at how a collaborative approach has enhanced outcomes for children and young people of refugee backgrounds in New South Wales schools. We'll have about 25 minutes together for our panel discussion. So I'm sure there'll be some lively discussion. We may run out of time, but my role really is to moderate our discussion around a series of questions. Now, if you have a question for the panel, there is a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, a Zoom icon, which you'll see there. It's alongside the chat icon. You're able to enter or type in a question there. Now, if time permits, we'll address as many of these as we can. We'll see how we go. Meanwhile, though, the chat box will remain active for other messages. You'll see that next to the Q&A icon. Okay, well, first of all, allow me to introduce the panel. And we have quite a distinguished panel here today of your colleagues. And first of all, Jorge Aroche. Jorge G. Aroche is a clinical psychologist and the Chief Executive Officer of the New South Wales Service for the Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture and Trauma Survivors. Jorge has worked with migrants and refugee survivors of torture and organised violence since before 1989, when he joined STARTS. He has led the organisation since March 1997 through some of the most challenging times for refugee services in Australia, helping STARTS grow from a dozen staff to more than 200, assuming a truly statewide role and becoming a world leader in this field in the process. Since its inception in 1988, STARTS has assisted over 70,000 individual clients from over 100 nationalities in the context of a systemic and integrative model of service provision that includes cutting-edge clinical programs informed by the latest developments in neuroscience, alongside community development and group intervention streams. Welcome, Jorge. We're also joined by Julianne Yunus. Julianne is a psychologist with over 17 years experience. Having commenced her career in 2003, she's currently the senior child and adolescent counsellor and a trainer at Starts. Prior to joining Starts, Julianne worked in a number of clinical settings, including community health, mental health, and youth health services within New South Wales Health. Welcome, Julianne. We're also joined by Lena Ishu. Lena is a Starts Youth Program team leader. With over 24 years experience working as a youth development worker with different organisations, Lena has been particularly successful in supporting the leadership skills of disengaged young people. With Starts, Lena has notably been managing the youth team, organising youth camps, facilitating group work and integrating sport, dance, art and other creative activities to assist youth achieve their full potential and aspirations. Welcome, Lena. We're also joined by Sean Naguran. Sean Naguran is a psychotherapist, community development practitioner, and mental health researcher with experience in complex emergency settings. His work over the last 20 years has spanned across the United Nations, government, university, NGO sectors, and he is currently the team leader of the School Liaison Program at Starts. Prior to working with Starts, Sean served internationally with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in conflict and post-conflict areas. And our final panelist is Dr. Ansuya Naguran. Dr. Ansuya is a South African academic and applied theatre practitioner. She currently holds the position of Community Development Evaluation Officer at Starts. Ansuya has facilitated and conducted research mainly within the South African prison and residential child and youth care settings. She's also facilitated applied theatre programs in the USA aimed at addressing issues of systemic oppression. Ansuya holds a PhD in applied theatre from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. Welcome to our panelists. Well, we'll get straight into it. We'd like to start with a question for you, Jorge. Jorge, Starts has been working in schools for over 30 years now. Can you tell us how we've come to this point? And what do you think are some of the challenges and opportunities moving forward?
Oh, look, it's been a very long road, as you point out, 30 years. To begin with, as I mentioned in the video, we didn't see children as a main target. We thought they'd be affected by the experiences of their parents. As a result, I suppose, of changes in the world, we saw more and more children, starting with many children coming from Africa that had been traumatized themselves, but then increasingly in other places, we began to realize that many children were being affected directly. It was also because during that time, we've learned that trauma can affect people in different ways. And the way that trauma affects the brain means that the kids that have suffered trauma and trying to recover from their experiences may have difficulties in paying attention, in focusing, in being in a classroom with others. And that is expressed in many, many ways, which are often confused with basically being shy or being overactive or being or behaving badly. And it took a while in working with counselors from different schools and teachers. I could see that there was something else going on for us to begin to realize that yes, there was. As we began to work with counselors and teachers, we really realized that there was a lot more, and this issue ran a lot deeper. It's been a continuous learning process. And as the programs expanded, both in terms of what we do with the youth program, with counselors that increasingly specialize in working with young children and adolescents, and lately with the school liaison program, which has really given us much wider access to schools, we really began to get a sense of how important it is to engage at this level, to engage early, as Peter Shergold was making a point, to ensure that kids have the best opportunity to realize their potential by overcoming trauma, which really is a fundamental barrier into anything that they can engage in through the education system, but also in terms of the future in Australia. So in terms of the future, I think that this is really a priority in terms of what we do. I think that I finished the video saying that it's an investment, but I probably should have said it's an investment we cannot afford not to make, because the cost of not making it, both in terms of the lives of those children, but the success of the refugee resettlement program would be enormous. So hopefully we're looking at a bright future, for the school in the STARTS program and similar programs elsewhere in Australia, like the one you run. Great.
Thank you, Jorge. And it's an amazing story. We'll turn to you, Lena, with a question. How has working collaboratively across the 3 sub-teams, SLP, youth team, CNA program, as well as in collaboration with other STARTS programs, for example, FICT, how has that helped to enhance outcomes for students from refugee backgrounds?
I think it's the best way, it's the best model to deliver for young people, especially of refugee background, because the concept of counseling, it's very rare or weak or non-existing in many communities that they settle in Australia. So to have youth team work or group work or any intervention at the community level, it's a soft entry to other services that we provide at STARTS. So, and it's make it easier and increases the trust, of clients or young people with staff. So that is very crucial. And plus we do a lot of consultation, so we engage young people in our discussions, and we always try to get counselors been working with us in similar programs, so they see that young people will see that counselors are human, are not really beast over there doing something weird. And this is what we hear. As soon as a counselor, they want to run away. So yeah, so it's a soft entry. Like Julianne knows very well, like at the youth center, every time we had an issue with a young person, we called on one of our chaplains and counselor to attend and just talk to them, like a gentle chat, and then we will refer them gently back to our services. So one of the best actually modules, and I really, really believe that what we do, it's not just one step and that's it. It's like a process. So we don't stop. We continue doing it and redoing it, and we invent ways, to engage with young people. And it's the hardest thing. And I think many people here will agree with me. It's the hardest target group that you work with, and to be engaged in an organization like STARTS, basically. And I think Julianne and Sean will add into that as well, because for me as a person, my best groups that I ever run, it was when I have them as a co-facilitated with a counselor. It's like a puzzle, so we put puzzle pieces together and we create that beautiful picture. It's exactly like that.
Thank you, Lena. I might ask a question to the panel more generally. Could you comment on the importance of working systemically with regards to meeting the needs of students from refugee backgrounds? And we see that this multi-scalar, the work that STARTS is doing, and what about the systemic? Why is that important?
Shall I say something?
Terrific. Thanks, Julianne.
It would be unheard of if I didn't talk, those that know me. It's essential to work systemically. I think there's a metaphor that I've definitely connected with when it comes to providing really quality services to people from refugee backgrounds and families. They're connected to so many different levels of the community. There's the school communities, there's the broader refugee community, there's all sorts of different subsets of the community that families and individuals within families connect with. So it's so important that we also ensure that our services are targeting similar, looking similar to the way that they're connecting across the community. I think the other important element of this question is that ultimately the first place young people connect is the school, and schools are systems. And we have to be able to help enhance those school systems to support them. The analogy that connects most for me is that it takes a village. Yeah, we have to work collaboratively, we have to work systemically, we have to kind of pool our resources and make sure that we're all supporting each other to support these young people. Their needs at times can be quite complex. They can be a lot for one service to carry. So the more that we're able to work together, I think it often always will equate to really good outcomes for young people, which is exactly why each of us are here and our colleagues are here. We want to make sure that young people have bright futures and they're thriving. Please feel free to add, colleagues.
I think that's great. I think that's great, Julianne. I just wanted to add to a little bit to that as well, in that, you know, a big part of our strategy has been around, you know, of course, systemic change, and one of the tools that we've implemented alongside Department of Education and Catholic schools is around our partner networks and our clusters. So basically, these have been forums for partnership and collaboration. So in the same way that, you know, Lena's team and those that Julianne works with are a multidisciplinary team, acknowledging that we all have different expertise but we all have the same goal around student well-being. So we've tried to encourage and promote this in helping establish clusters across New South Wales that involve a group of schools that come together to reflect on the needs of young people with a refugee experience. You know, we acknowledge we involve people at the coalface, so teachers at the coalface, and also decision makers, so people at the executive. We also involve other partner organizations to come together and to action plan things at the, you know, at the both at the individual school level and at the collective level. And we would action plan ways towards improving issues, of course, around, you know, pedagogy, and talking about, you know, teachers would obviously talk about the curriculum, but also a big focus on well-being, responding to trauma, and unpacking the work on the practitioner themselves. And we acknowledge that, you know, it's not easy work, and, you know, there's probably a lot of teachers as well that would be on this webinar, and we acknowledge the huge role that you play in the well-being of young people, and we play a big support role, but we acknowledge the huge role that the teachers play, but also acknowledging that, well, we all need to work together and we all have our own expertise, and in order to achieve those systemic goals, it's about collaboration, yeah, and partnership.
Thank you, Sean.
If I can add a couple of words, Greg.
Yes, thanks, Jorge.
Trauma, torture, you know, the persecution that leads to people becoming refugees are systemic issues. They're not natural disasters, they're man-made, and they play a role in keeping systems working the way they do. And this is why it's so important to engage with systems to reverse that process. And that, I think, you know, is a basis of providing an experience that can be reparatory for children as they go through the system. And I think it's important that the system continues to realize that there are kids that come with some vulnerabilities that need to be first identified, that we need to provide for before, you know, they can fully participate. And that work at the systemic level is one of the crucial areas in which we've made a lot of gains, particularly in the last few years, as we were able to expand the program to really become a truly statewide program.
Thank you, Jorge. Thinking more recently around some of the initiatives around capacity building and resource development, working with young people of refugee backgrounds, could any of the panel share with us some of the initiatives you've created, for example, with a topical focus on the current Afghan crisis or the COVID pandemic impacting young people?
I think Sean can start because Sean's school liaison team actually did a great job in contacting so many schools. Sean, do you want to start with that, and I'll continue from there?
Yeah, okay, I can talk a little bit around that specific to the Afghan situation. So, I mean, I think over the last few years, we've really had to pivot, I guess, in terms of the way that we disseminate information. My team has a large focus on capacity building and professional learning, and we've done this a lot across New South Wales in partnership with the child and adolescent counsellors and the youth workers as well. But we've really had to, I guess, change in terms of the way we disseminate information and try to make it more readily accessible and available for teachers and also for counsellors as well. And as a result of this, we've established a website called Hints for Healing, which has different podcasts. It has research that we've been involved in. It has interviews. It has different articles about specific to working alongside young people with a refugee experience and also having an early childhood focus as well. And so recently, because of the current crisis in Afghanistan, we've recorded podcasts with Afghan practitioners in Dari. We've also have some other content in Hazaragi as well, around how parents can promote well-being for the young people and we've been able to disseminate this through schools, who then send this to targeted to Afghan parents, who then of course listen and would be able to gain some tools around some practical tools as well. We've also come up with with action sheets that send out to counselors and also to teachers around specific to what young people might be experiencing as a result of the current circumstance in Afghanistan. But we acknowledge that there could be potential re-traumatization for other young people with a refugee experience. So it's quite broad as well. I know that there's been some specific things that Lena and Julianne have been doing, so I'll hand it over to them.
From just following from Sean, is what we've done is we are working currently with about 5 different high schools and IECs in New South Wales, let's say. In some of what we did is we implemented Be Well program, which is around mental health conversation. So some of those are group work, some of them we run forums for them. So it depends on the need of the school itself. So, and they were excellent in terms of attendance, in terms of feedback from students and teachers in schools, and in terms of even increase of self-referrals to STARTS counseling as well. And this is what we were hearing. Not only that, many schools started referring parents. So I referred a lot of parents to our direct services, okay, in terms of having groups with them. Now, all this done not by myself, definitely, because what we started doing when Sean's team raised the issue of that there's many schools needing help, is we met with all the Afghan national staff that we've got at STARTS, and we looked at what we can do together and how we can support each other's, and not to even overwhelm our staff in that sense. So we involved in that discussion the child and adolescent counselors as well. So you will see in schools, in different schools, we were running different formats of intervention and having child and adolescent counselor with youth worker or school liaison officer, okay, running these activities across the schools. Julianne can
yeah, we might just hold it with that question, Lena. We're running out of time, and I wanted to have an opportunity for Ansuya to respond to a question. As the evaluator, I'm curious to hear, Ansuya, how you see it in terms of how has the internal collaboration within STARTS impacted or modelled the work done alongside schools across New South Wales?
Yeah, it's been incredible, as the panelists have said, Julianne, Lena, and Sean. And as Jorge has said, because trauma and torture are systemic, that the approach needs to be systemic as well. in dealing with that. And I think that the evaluation report really shows how that internal collaboration of the individual work of the child and adolescent counselors, the youth team, and the school liaison program, who are not only working with young people in schools, but also working to better capacitate those working in schools to better support children and young people of refugee experience. And I think that internal collaboration and that three-pronged approach was really important. And I think it really comes across in the findings of the report too.
Thank you, Ansuya. And while you're with us, we do have one question in the Q&A asking what is the potential and efficacy of creative activities such as art, craft, drama, and music therapy in helping refugee children overcome detrimental impacts of their refugee experiences? Would you like to respond to that one?
Absolutely, yes. The potential is huge, and as the findings of the report show, many of START's programs involve those activities that that were mentioned in the chat. Art, drama, music, sporting activities, and one of the most important findings, I think, for me from the report was children and young people told us in interviews that we conducted with them that opportunity to participate in activities like that not only improved their skills in those specific activities, but most importantly, it offered an opportunity for young people to connect with each other and to build social capital while participating in those programs. And as Jorge mentioned, torture and trauma is systemic, and systemic state-sponsored terrorism acts deliberately to break down connections and cultivate fear and mistrust. And those that fear and mistrust can long survive the circumstances under which they were cultivated. And so developing new connections in a new context can be really difficult. And having young people come together to participate in arts activities or sporting activities, they've told us provides them with opportunity to make new friends, that cultivates a sense of belonging that they wouldn't otherwise have had. So absolutely, the potential for those activities in healing is huge.
Thank you so much, Ansuya. Now, we've run out of time. So unfortunately, we said we'd finish at 5. So thanks so much to the panel. And it's terrific to have you all together today to respond to these questions. And back to you, Nuria. Okay, we do seem to be waiting for Nuria. So while we're waiting for her, there was one question that was raised in the Q&A about, for example, Sean, you spoke about the clusters of schools and the capacity building work with schools. How does the direct therapeutic work relate to that? How those clusters work with the schools?
Yeah, so as I mentioned previously, within the clusters and the networks, there are counsellors who are involved, who have placed quite an integral part of that. And because it's acknowledged that well-being is an integral part of the students' experience, particularly in accessing the curriculum. So often, I mean, every cluster is different across New South Wales, and of course, it's based on the needs of the particular, of the forum. But sometimes there might be some professional learning elements or some, some talk around identifying trauma in the classroom and classroom implications, all things around vicarious trauma and self-care. And some of the feedback for at least one of the forums that we did in Albury Wodonga in Albury recently was around the stress at the moment. So the council was able to facilitate a discussion around what they might be experiencing as a result of COVID and some strategies around dealing with that as well.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Sorry, Craig. It took me a while to find my space back. Thank you. So thanks everyone, and thanks Craig for facilitating the discussion. So on behalf of STARS, I would like to thank all of the panelists for your wonderful contribution to the report, but also for your participating in the panel. Thank all of people who contributed to the producing the video clip, and but also those of who contributed to the report. It's so many names that I can say it, but you know who you are. Because of your contribution, it would have not been possible to have this outstanding report. So thank you so much for that. And last but not least, thanks to all of our participants for making the time this in this late afternoon instead of going to shopping, but staying here and being with us and listening to us. We really, really appreciate this. What a wonderful webinar, and it certainly makes me so proud to work at STARS and be a part of this organization. So thank you so much. If you'd like to have a copy of the report, please go to our website, and Karen just put the link in the chat box. So thank you very much for attending the webinar, for participating. Have a wonderful evening, and we do hope to see you again in another wonderful launch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.